Ladies and gentlemen, the world's richest man is battling out over hurricane relief, challenging Pete Buttigieg on why they're so bad at getting people internet and basic supplies. To me, this is the funniest thing and also one of the most tragic things, that we need Elon Musk to step in and tell the government, hey, you should probably help the people who pay your salaries. But we've got that. We've got a couple other stories today. Joe Biden made his first ever appearance in the White House press briefing room, shocking journalists, which is probably a bad sign for a man who's about to leave the White House. But before we get into that, I feel like I have to address the elephant in the room. I am not Tim Pool. You guys know me. I'm Hannah Claire Brimmel. I co-host this show. Tim Pool, our beloved beanied host, has been summoned away on a semi-secret mission to Pennsylvania. I won't say by who. I won't say to do what. I would keep an eye on his socials this weekend. I'm sure he'll update you. But in his stead, I'm here so that we do not miss a show. We like to bring a show every night to our viewers. You guys do so much for us, so we are trying to stay as consistent as possible for you guys. So thanks. And if you are sad that I'm here, well, I'll be gone some other day. So before we get started, we have to give a shout out to our sponsor for the night, and that is, of course, MyPillow. Mike Lindell is one of the funniest people to have on this show. It's so fun to see his business working with us. And you guys probably know their story, but once again, MyPillow has been canceled by another box store. So they were passing on an incredible offer to our listeners. That's you guys. The standard pillow retails for $49.98 and is now, for a limited time, you will receive one for only $14.98. There's a limit of 10 on this offer. So you can get 10 of these pillows at $14.98. Hopefully you have a lot of beds in your house, or Christmas is coming. Give everyone you know a MyPillow. Do not miss out on this amazing deal while supplies last. Order now using promo code TIM. Maybe one day there'll be a Brimcast promo code. Who knows? Somebody call Mike. MyPillow is made with a patented adjustable fill. It adjusts to your exact individual needs, regardless of your sleep position. Helps keep your neck aligned and holds its shape all night long, so you get the best sleep of your life. But that's not all. Get their 6-piece kitchen or bath towel sets for only $25, the brand new mattress topper for as low as $69.98, and their famous MyPillow bed sheets for as low as $25, and so much more. So go to mypillow.com, or you can go to mypillow.com, use promo code TIM to get a huge discount on all MyPillow products, including the standard size MyPillow for only $14.98. That's the lowest price ever, so order today. And remember, if you don't order it, then you don't give pillows out for Christmas and everyone thinks you're the Grinch. Okay, let's get started. So our first story, I'm sorry, Serge, I'm not good at this job. I would be remiss if I didn't tell you guys to go to timcast.com, become a member there. It supports all of our work. You can see stuff like the Culture War Daily Show. You can see Pop Culture Crisis. You can, of course, check out our Trash House Records and all of their music. I think this is the last day
Totally
of
their
last day of their charting week. You can get an update on that. So yeah, this is how you support us. You become a member and you shop at MyPillow with discount code TIM. Okay, now let's get started with our first story, addressing Elon Musk.
Or introductions.
Oh, yeah. Oh, my gosh. I'm so bad at this today. Sorry, I got very little notice that I was supposed to be here. Okay. So joining us tonight is Josh Sider.
Thanks for having me.
Who are you? What do you do?
So I'm Josh, and I opine on all things gender-related on social media.
And you've just decided that was your calling in life?
I did. I feel very passionately about it. It's just something that I've always felt strongly about. So, that's kind of my full-time thing right now.
I'm glad you could join us tonight. Maybe we'll get a little bit of gender news today.
Absolutely.
We also have the one, the only, the patron saint of the rambunctious lectern leader.
Hey, thanks for having me on again. Appreciate it.
Who are you? What do you do?
Well, I'm America's most notorious furniture mover. I am a reformed terrorist. I learned a lot in prison. Mostly the government hates me and hates you, and we should do something about that.
Mm-hmm. I hope people are really paying attention to the screen when you're on, and I won't say why. Joining us tonight also is
Don't
Carter
we have
Banks.
a piece of your furniture here?
Oh, that's not mine. I borrowed that.
Oh, well, hey, man, it's great to have you both here. I'm Carter Banks, president of Trash House Records. We just released a new song. First of all, thanks for having me on, Hannah Claire Brimcast.
You almost called me Hannah?
No, I was trying to figure out how to finish that sentence. I just want to say thanks to everyone who bought the song. I think it's going to do really well, and I really appreciate it. And speaking of which, we have Phil back from tour.
Hello, everybody. My name is Phil Labonte. I am the lead singer of the heavy metal band All That Remains. I'm an anti-communist. I'm a counter-revolutionary, and I am back to do do all kinds of opining about the idiocy on the left.
I'm glad you're back. It's so cool to see you in studio again.
Thank you.
It's been like, what, 2 months?
Probably like 10 weeks because we had 2 weeks of rehearsal before the tour started, and then the tour was like 8 weeks or something.
Yeah, I had your tour dates like written down on my calendar. It's been a long time. It's like 3 calendars worth.
Yeah. So if you're mad that I'm here, be glad that Phil is here.
I'm back.
Okay, finally, let's get into our first story of the night. Elon Musk, or we'll pull this one from NBC. Buttigieg claps back at Elon Musk for false claims about Helene federal response. So I'm going to jump over to this tweet. Elon Musk posted this text exchange that he had. He said, receive this is about 6 hours ago. Received this 20 minutes ago. The level of belligerent government incompetence is staggering. 2 exclamation points. And he is communicating with someone about what's going on with FEMA. The person he's texting says, they are now about to shut down the airspace to regulate the private choppers. We are riding in to deliver Starlink and supplies. We are pushing back with the Trump team as well to help us, but not looking good. So we've heard a couple reports like this that federal officials on the ground are resisting efforts from skilled private citizens who have the experience, maybe volunteer firefighters and different groups who want to help the thousands of people who have been impacted by the hurricane in North Carolina, in Tennessee, in Georgia. And Elon Musk is one of those people, right? I mean, Starlink is this amazing technology. We have the ability to bring internet access to places that really need it right now. I mean, if you're someone without a cell phone connection, if you don't have Wi-Fi, it's very difficult to even tell sheriffs that you are maybe in trouble and need help. And it seems like this is not something that the federal government, or at least the people on the ground, were being very cooperative with. But in response, Pete Buttigieg said, no one is shutting down the airspace, and FAA doesn't block legitimate rescue and recovery flights. If you are encountering a problem, give me a call. This, I think, is noteworthy.
Did he give his phone number out?
Apparently, they have
Call that man.
Yeah, we should.
Call that man.
So Elon Musk ultimately responded to that. Thanks for the call. So I guess Pete Buttigieg called Elon Musk and said, hopefully we can resolve this soon. To me, in addition to all of the hurricane issues, in addition to how important it is to stay conscious of what your neighbors need and the best way to serve other people, I think we should point out the fact that Elon Musk bought X and is now forcing the federal government to take accountability for what's going on. I mean, his post has over 11 million impressions. That's more than most TV shows will ever get. This is an incredible tool, and it's nice to see someone as influential as Elon Musk using it to really draw attention to where.
I think it's interesting. I mean, didn't he help Ukraine with? They were like pumped about him letting Ukraine have Starlink.
Yeah, it went to
Ukraine. Wrong about that? Yeah, but not for a hurricane relief.
No, it doesn't seem like they're being treated the same way.
It's good Jack Dorsey doesn't own Twitter anymore, because he might have put a community footnote under Elon Musk's tweet and tried to censor it since it didn't bode well for the government. So I'm glad Elon's not only opining on Twitter, but he's also the CEO. So.
Not only is Musk, I think most people are aware, like, Musk is not only doing this, but he's also the guy that's, sending a rocket up to the International Space Station to bring the 2 astronauts back that Boeing couldn't manage to do. He's assisted the U.S. government in Ukraine. It's clear that the federal government is hostile to him because they've got all kinds of investigations. They're doing all they can to hinder launching Starship. And it's all because of politics. It's all because Elon Musk owns Twitter and uses the platform to say things that are not complimentary to the federal government. And really, of the social media sites that are at least, of reasonable size, Twitter's really the only one that's not in lockstep with, at least with the mainstream media. Maybe they're not all MSNBC. There's a little hope with, Zuckerberg saying things like, I consider myself a libertarian, which we'll see.
He's still making Instagram into Facebook.
I mean,
faster than anyone can.
I'm not a fan of Meta's properties generally, and the only one that I use with any frequency is Instagram. But it's nice to at least see some kind of recognition that, hey, maybe it wasn't such a great idea to be so complacent. Complacent with the federal government. I mean, it should have been obvious to these companies that the federal government has an agenda that is not aligned with the with the intended purpose of the federal government, which is to remain neutral. The federal government is not supposed to have an opinion on who gets elected. And they strongly put their, put as much influential information out as they can nowadays. And that's something that is a problem. So, and to see the federal government looking to, a private citizen that has so much to offer to the country when it comes to, things like Starlink and things like disaster relief and stuff like that, to look at him as to be so hostile to him, I think it clearly puts the federal government in a bad light, or at least this administration.
FEMA is running damage control right now on Twitter. If you go to their page, they have a whole bunch of things. Rumor has it as this, they're rumors, it's not true. Starlink comes in, what happens? We get stories on the ground from people because of internet access. They can show you video in real time, this is what is happening.
Yeah, I think that's important to point out. I mean, if people are not able to contact their loved ones, they're definitely not in a position to contact their local news reporters or to post on their own X accounts and give on the ground feedback. I want to call attention to one thing that Pete Buttigieg said, which is the FAA doesn't block legitimate rescue and recovery flights. It reminds me of what Biden was saying a little bit earlier this week. President Biden said, I'm going to go down, but I'm going to wait until it's not disruptive to emergency services. And there is one version of this that is honorable, right? Like, it's not about his prowess. It's about making sure people get the things they need. On the other hand, I don't think anyone believed that was genuine. Is this sort of a legitimate concern for the government that it's search and rescue should take priority over things like Starlink? Or is it actually just kind of a dodge because both things could be happening at the same time?
Well, that method didn't work for the border, and there was emergency down there, right? Their presence, or their absence of their presence, didn't really fix that. And on top of this, these people need help. And I can't help but think there is that saying, if we don't pay taxes, who's going to fix the roads? I'm looking at Americans coming and saving Americans, and the government getting in the way of that.
I think it's also a tale as old as time because private entities usually work much more efficaciously to get things done because there's not the bureaucracy that you have with government entities. And I think the government takes umbrage at that and gets angry when they see a private entity doing something better than they can. So not only is the government slow moving and not doing anything, they then lambast the private entity that's doing it better than them because it makes them look bad. And so I think we're seeing that play out with the border, as he mentioned, and now with Elon Musk.
You're reminding me that there's this report out that Dolly Parton, who's famously from Tennessee, very devoted to the state, just gave, I think it's $1 million to start hurricane relief efforts because her response is basically like, these are my people, these are my neighbors. And I think that altruism from the private sector, the individual wealthy person doing something is important. And maybe our dependency on the federal government has sort of lulled us out of that mentality that it's our responsibility.
Right, it's like a shining example of like the success of capitalism over government control, and they don't like that.
Do you think that Americans are going to pay attention to this for the next 6 weeks? Or are we afraid this story is going to fade to the background?
I don't think that I'm not sure about 6 weeks, but I don't think that there's the option of not paying attention for the next couple of weeks because, these rescue efforts going to be going on for a while. I've heard that the death toll is 200, but there's probably over 1,000 missing. And those people that are missing are, I mean, it's terrible to say, but they're not likely just like wandering in the woods. Entire towns were wiped off the map. And if you know anything about the topography of the area, you're not building your towns on the tops of the mountains. They're built alongside these rivers and streams that run through the valleys and the hollers of North Carolina. So the water that came and swept these towns away, like it's nowadays, unfortunately, or at this point in time, this far after the initial deluge of water, it's not a rescue effort; it's a recovery effort.
Yeah. And what does rebuilding look like in this area? I was listening to this report yesterday that was saying basically this is the Blue Ridge Mountains, I believe. It's a lot of second homes. Like there are houses that were destroyed that are vacation homes, but that means that the blue-collar, working-class people who live there are often displaced and don't really have the resources or industry to sort of move on and recover. I mean, if Asheville, North Carolina is struggling and that's the nearest big city, these more rural towns that don't have the housing inventory because it's partially vacation and because it has now been destroyed, what are they going to do?
Hurt their economy really bad.
And I think this is brings out another point, which is reality over rhetoric. And lots of times I think the left likes to showcase lofty rhetoric about how much they care about people. But then when we actually see something happen where something needs to be done, they're not doing much. And so I think they've really become experts at mastering the rhetoric. But when it comes to reality, they really don't do much. And so it's good that private entities and people like Elon Musk and Dolly, as you mentioned, can kind of step in, because that's all we have, not just with the Democrats, but sometimes with Republicans, is just rhetoric. But I think we see it much more often on the left.
Yeah. I wonder if this concern, I think you guys have all heard this too, that so many of these counties that were impacted are red. They're likely counties that Trump will carry in the election. If they will feel more disenfranchised now that the recovery efforts are slow, but then also feel like they don't have outlets. I mean, I don't totally know what the plan is for voting in these areas. If you don't really have electricity for homes, I'm not sure your polling place is standing.
Yeah, I've heard some people, like left-leaning people, saying some pretty atrocious things, that it's a positive for the for the Democrats and stuff. And I mean, whereas they may be correct, it may be hard to get votes, people from that area voting. The fact that it comes to mind is kind of just gross, And,
By any means necessary. I
Yeah.
mean, that is their mantra, right?
yeah,
I mean, it's hard to look at tragedies like, and this wouldn't be the first one of the year, where they have looked at it and went, great, we're glad that's happening to you. I'm obviously making an allusion to the attempt on Donald Trump's life in Butler, Pennsylvania in July. And, as we all know, but Trump is returning to the same spot this weekend.
The balls.
Right. I mean, it is interesting that at this time that we have this I would say national disaster, right? From what I know, this hurricane is comparable to Katrina in terms of loss of life. I mean, we are still waiting on numbers. Like Phil said, it's thousands/unknowns amount of people that are still missing. And this is Donald Trump kind of embodying resiliency. He's saying, I'm going to go back and I'm going to keep pushing and I'm going to keep fighting. And I think that's interesting when there are so many Americans who are probably right now thinking like, they're in very desperate times.
The response to Katrina was also a lot more heartfelt for the entire country. Mm-hmm. We all came together during Katrina. Didn't musicians make songs and sing together?
Yeah.
And there were all these
different
reliefs.
times.
It was different times, right?
So different.
The last time I was here, we were talking about what fixes the country, because it's a generational issue. And I mentioned it has to be something like a 9/11 or a major disaster that pulls everyone together. And Tim's like, I don't think that'll even work anymore. Mm-hmm. And here we are. We see a disaster that's affected both sides of the fence. And where are the songs?
I don't think that.
Yeah, Phil, where are the songs?
Well, there are songs.
I'm just kidding.
I don't think that a natural disaster would pull people together the way that an attack would. So hypothetically, if there was an attack that had thousands of people that passed away, that were victims, that might do it.
What if one side just blames the other side for
Well, I mean, that's possible.
continued infighting?
That's
possible.
I think we'd need
pattern.
aliens, something totally different.
Well, I saw this post on
Project
X
Bluebeam.
today.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Send it.
I saw this post on X today that was like comparing and contrasting the New York Times. And the New York Times, during Katrina basically had wall-to-wall coverage of what was going on, the recovery efforts and the responses and all of this stuff. And as far as I know, the New York Times covered the hurricane and moved on to talking about January 6th. Again, I don't know if you're paying them to do that. I know you want to keep it alive, but it's sort of ridiculous.
For us, it's good for us.
We have this moment to be like, look, this is the thing that needs attention. J.D. Vance made this comment during the debate. They're talking about the gun violence epidemic, and he was like, yes, we should talk about this, especially in inner cities, which does not get the coverage. I mean, news media coverage for some of these serious issues can make or break. It can really change the lives of people impacted by it. Why the New York Times would be turning its eyes away for something that happened several years ago seems like a disservice to the country.
Yeah, they always say there's lying and then there's lying just by omission. And the media, like you said, really shapes the narrative. And by just omitting things or refusing to talk about things, they're lying. And so I live in Chicago, where there's obviously a lot of gun violence, but the people perpetrating this,
In MAGA
shocker,
country?
are not a bunch of MAGA Republicans that are going around shooting little kids and shooting each other. They happen to be people that the media does not want to portray in any negative light, and so it just doesn't get talked about. And when they do that, they effectively erase it as if it's not happening.
Yeah.
But I live there, and it is happening.
Yeah. I think that's a good point. And on the notes of the media being willing to show certain people in negative lights, I'm going to jump to this story from the New York Post. Trump rips terrible White House response to Helene as FEMA accused of mismanaging crisis and blocking aid. So very similar to Elon Musk, Donald Trump is speaking out about what the federal government is up to and sort of the dissatisfaction with this. And he is facing a lot of backlash. I think you can look at mainstream headlines where they are saying Donald Trump is saying false things about FEMA and he's not being fair, but people are unhappy with FEMA. So former President Donald Trump tore into what he calls the terrible federal response to Hurricane Helene Friday as outrage critics aired allegations that relief workers are sitting idle without orders and that those who are working are, quote, seizing aid deliveries and slow walking distributions of Starlink satellite internet equipment. Quote, it has been a terrible response from the White House, that the Republican presidential nominee said in Georgia, where he was briefed on the damage around the city of Augusta alongside GOP Governor Brian Kemp, who thanked Trump for helping to keep the nation's attention on those affected by the storm. I mean, is this a question of we're not allowed to critique FEMA because they do hypothetically the Lord's work? I mean, they're the relief agency, so we can't be mean to them, or can we criticize the government when they're failing?
Ain't gonna stop me.
I know, and that's why we're glad you're back.
They're booking out hotels in these cities where they're rescuing these people who have no homes, they lost everything. FEMA's coming in and booking out all these hotels. Where are the people who actually need a place to stay getting to stay?
Mm-hmm. And is this, and I mean, maybe we need to turn to our small government person in the room, but is this a case where we look at FEMA and say, you are bad at your job and you should maybe be reconsidered as a government organization?
I'm not sure about. I don't know that FEMA needs to be reconsidered overall, but it's definitely something that you should be like, hey, there needs to be a change in leadership. Right off the bat, we've reached a time in America where there is no accountability from the federal government. You look at, I mean, from the top down, like Joe Biden is clearly not capable. He's clearly checked out. And the constitutional solution for that is Kamala Harris is supposed to, not just like has the option, but when it's something that's obvious, Kamala Harris is supposed to invoke the 25th Amendment.
None from her, she says. I mean,
what's going on? You have an administration that's run by someone clearly incompetent, and you have all kinds of things that are going on in the world that the president might be able to influence in a positive manner for the United States if we had a president that could do it. And we have Kamala Harris, the vice president, who has done nothing for 4 years but shirk whatever job that she was given. The border, she ignores it. She was like a cybersecurity czar or something like that, right? There was one of that. Yeah. She ignores it. She should be making sure that the office of the president is occupied by someone that is capable of actually understanding the questions that are posed to it, and she's shirking that job too. So if the leader of your government, or allegedly the president, the office of the executive, right, if that job doesn't ever have accountability, there's no longer a president that says the buck stops here. They're always passing the buck. They're saying it's that person's fault and that person's fault. Mayorkas was impeached, still in his job. No government official is held accountable for failure. And if that's your situation, where the government can just do whatever they want, and there's no way for the people or for the other branches of government to hold them accountable, I mean, what do you got? You've got people that are. The Biden administration has been such a failure, they cannot tie Kamala Harris to it. And because everyone knows that, like, Biden has not done a good job historically, like low numbers in polling, right? You tie Kamala to him in any type of way, she's going to fail to run presidency.
Right. I was just thinking, it's like funny that she's done nothing for 4 years, because it's almost better that she's done nothing and failed at nothing, because now she can campaign on zero. You've got like how many illegal immigrants have come over the border in 4 years?
Easily 10 million.
Something like 10 million.
That's a failure for sure.
And I don't care how many times people say, oh, you're a bad person for saying it. These people are being moved throughout the country by the federal government. They're being moved to states like Ohio and states like Florida, where if they go there and they vote Democrat, they could shift the balance. They could change the makeup of what the population would normally vote for. They're going to purple states, or they're going to places that are strongly red, and they're hoping to make them purple. That's not deniable. There's nobody that's going to say, oh, they're not bringing people into the country. That's clearly that's happening. What happens is if you say this is why, you get called names. And so this is something that the federal government has been completely and totally, it's worse than not doing your job. It's actively trying to use government policy to help one party over another in the face or against the wishes of the population of the United States. Yeah. You look at, I think it was like 70% of the people they said in the debate, they said like 70% of people want to actually start deportations. Like, I was astounded when I heard that number.
It's pretty crazy to
like most of the time Americans are like, I don't know if I want to go ahead and like start knocking on doors and being like, are you an American? 70% of the population are like, get them out of here. That's because of the not just failure, but the active the things that the government has done, the things that the administration has done.
This is an active crisis that they are involved
Intentional.
in.
And there's no denying it
There's
anymore.
no denying it. And I think this is a cultural question that there are a lot of people who work on this issue, but definitely Donald Trump bringing it up in the 2016 election made it so that it was in a political stratosphere that conservatives, Republicans had been uncomfortable touching. But more than anything, crime, the wait at hospitals, the impact it has on school systems, people themselves are feeling the impact of illegal immigration. And I think that is a difficult pill for corporate outlets to swallow, because they want the narrative to be like, we can't talk about it because it's bad and it makes you mean. And
yeah, exactly. I want to interject here, because it's not that they've been afraid of touching it. It's that the accusation is always bigotry.
But that's why they're afraid of it. I mean, this was something that Bill Clinton had said during one of his State of the Unions, right? That we needed to get control of the border. And still, we didn't do anything until basically Donald Trump. And it's not because there aren't some politicians and some sort of think tank people who talk about it. It's because it was so intensely tied to this accusation of racism. And I think that the realities of saying our border is open and it's fine and it's the same, like all the chickens have come home to roost. You know,
I saw Elon Musk had tweeted something about this situation, about the shipping of immigrants to different states to try to affect the outcomes and stuff like that. I don't think it's census. I think it's actually
they're going to get man mistake.
Active voters.
They brought in 30 million people who can vote in these states and flip them blue.
Yeah, that's what
Texas is going to be in play in 4 years.
And Obama used to talk about the border, and there was no accusations laid there about it being racist. It was only racist when Trump parroted the exact same thing.
It's only racist when it's a tool that the Democrats can use to chill conversations about it. The goal is to get people to not talk about it, because if they call you names, then you're afraid of them, and then you don't want to bring it up. And I think that the American, and this is bad for multiple reasons. It's bad because these are actual legitimate conversations that need to be had, but it's also bad because you've got a generation of kids that are teens and early 20s that don't care if you call them racist, and they're just going to be like, I don't care. And it's like you're actually giving cover to legitimate racists.
Well, you brought up a really good point earlier about accountability and how there's no accountability for government officials when they mess up really bad. And that's where the media comes in. The media is supposed to be the fourth estate. They're supposed to hold the government officials' feet to the fire and report on these things. And as we all know, investigative journalism is not funded anymore, so we don't really have the hard-hitting reports from the media anymore, and journalists aren't really journalists. They're Democratic apparatchiks. And so it's the failure of the media to do its job as a watchdog in the fourth estate, and that's why there's no accountability. And we saw it in gross terms when the Defense Department lost something like $1 trillion plus years ago, and to my knowledge, nobody got in trouble for that. That's $1 trillion that went missing, and there was no repercussions. So all of this, I think, is an indictment on the media and their failure to do their job as journalists, because that's what they are at the end of the day.
Here's something interesting I've noticed, because I watch a lot of true crime stuff, and they're picking it up, not realizing that there's a shift in crime, and more I'm seeing them talk about these different murders that are committed by people that are here illegally, and they talk about it like, no which way or the other, and it's kind
Just
of
as fact.
So they are, because it is fact, and it's like you didn't see that like 8 years ago, 4 years ago, but like every other headline now is like this, atrocious crimes committed by one or two people of a certain, personage that are not here, and they're trying to navigate the legalese of how do you prosecute somebody who's not even supposed to be here? Do you give them bail? And all these things are like, they're coming up more and more. So I think that's a positive for that kind of media. So it's getting something.
Well, and it's ironic because
that's good.
The left loves to play identity politics and talk about people's identities, except when it comes to crime and who's committing it. And then suddenly they no longer want to talk about identity politics or people's identities. So it's interesting how, as you pointed out earlier, they use it as a way to silence people, but they don't use it consistently. And it's just very nefarious on their part. And I think the left have become experts at using that, as you said, to chill speech, but they don't do it consistently.
Well, the argument that we're racist and bigots for not wanting illegal criminals here, it's on its face. It's not the argument we're making. America is not just white people. We do have immigrants that come here illegally. I'm friends with lots of them. Oh my God, I have a black friend. Reference. So
it's only bad if you say you only have one.
Okay,
if you have multiple, like a bunch of them, then you're good.
So it's fine. So that's not the argument we're trying to make. The first act they committed when they came here was a crime. They committed a crime by entering here illegally. Yeah. Those are the people we're talking about. Mm-hmm. America is not specifically and just exclusively white people.
Right. America requires participation on a civic level, and part of that is agreeing to live by American laws. I mean, Americans who are born in the U.S. don't get a free pass to commit crimes, right? They are still sent to prison if they are convicted of a crime. And I think similarly, people feel like more than ever that entering the country illegally is in fact a crime, which it always was, but sort of people looked past it. It was like they weren't in the middle of committing a crime when they also maybe had a DUI or, hit somebody or something tragic. I want to, because we're talking about crime and immigration, bring up this story from CNN. So this came out about 5 o'clock tonight. Gang attacks in Haiti kills 70 people, including infants. At least 70 people, including 3 infants, were killed in a gang attack in central Haiti town of Pont-Saint, the United Nations Human Rights Office said in a statement on Friday. Members of the Gangrif gang used automatic rifles to kill at least 70 people on Thursday, including 10 women and 3 infants, according to the UN. Haiti is one of the countries where there are certain authorizations that allow them to come into this country under a protected status with temporary protected status. And it is important to point out that there are a lot of countries that have instability, and it's a pathway towards asylum, right? Like if someone from Haiti were to say, well, there's very serious gang violence. Currently, most forms of asylum in the U.S. would be open to them. But I don't know that this is something that the American people feel like is a solution to this, right? Haiti will still have chaos and gang violence, but then also we are bringing in more migrants in maybe situations where the towns can't handle them. I mean, I know we've talked about Ohio a lot, but there are cities that struggle to absorb the tens of thousands of migrants that are suddenly brought to them. It's not because they don't want to help people. It's because resources are limited even here in America.
And this creates a perpetual problem, right? If we just keep saying, well, if it stays bad, just keep coming over. Mm-hmm. That just creates a very bad cycle for us. Until Haiti fixes Haiti, we're going to keep dealing with Haiti people coming over. Mm-hmm. And they're not the best of people that are coming over. We've seen that.
Are you saying they're not sending their best?
Sometimes.
You can't just absorb everyone who's in a bad spot.
Yeah, the idea that because you're from a country that has political instability or economic instability, because of that we should just take everybody that can get to our border. That's absolutely absurd. It's totally ridiculous, and it should be completely
impossible.
It's impossible. It should be totally and completely outside of the question. Like, there's no reason for the American people to say, if you can get here and you come from a place that's less fortunate than the United States, you're automatically allowed in. We have some of the most lax immigration laws, at least when it comes to people that get to the border, on the whole planet. Like, out of all of the countries, we're among the most lax. And that is a massive problem for the United States.
As someone who is very much against war, I'm going to start there, would it not be more fiscally responsible and for the safety of Americans to just invade Haiti and make it better? I'm just saying, it's a very small island. We can send maybe 5,000 troops, get it in line, and then that problem stops.
I think historically we've always meddled in Haiti's politics. I know we've overthrown some people there and installed some other people. So I don't know if getting involved with them is the best thing, but it's also a zero-sum.
Clintons would like it.
They love Haiti.
It's also a zero-sum game with all of this stuff. I'm from Chicago, as I said earlier. There's a lot of underserved African-American communities in Chicago. And because this is a zero-sum game, whatever our government does there in Chicago for the tens of thousands of migrants that have come there, and I see them every day when I go to the grocery store and Whole Foods, that's taking away from underserved communities in Chicago, which are predominantly African-American. So it's inherently racist for governments to be giving handouts to the illegal immigrants because it's taking away from other people who are citizens and residents who need it. And so I just think that's egregious, and I just think it's shameful.
Do you think that Kamala Harris is ever going to be able to reprogram her narrative on immigration in time for the election? I mean, and I'm going to contrast it with the economy, right? So immigration and the economy are two of the biggest issues this election. Even when Harris polls better on likability, on who would you rather hang out with at the mall or whatever the question is, Trump always comes out on top with who do you think is better suited to handle the economy and handle immigration. It's always Trump among voters. She has tried to gain ground on the economy by saying, instead of inflation, saying the cost of living crisis, right? She and her team have been able to repackage certain things. Is there a way for them to successfully message on immigration, or is it too far gone?
I think it depends if the media does their job. So I think she can get away with doing what she's doing, which is using this kind of Orwellian doublespeak where she's using euphemisms for inflation and calling it, as you just said, this cost of living crisis. So it really depends if the media does their job. And oftentimes we see them lobbying assists to the Democrats. And if they keep doing it, yes, she can continue doing what she's doing with impunity and her feet won't be held to the fire. But if the media actually did her job, I think that she would find it very tough to turn it around before the election. But she's just not put under much scrutiny. And so, yes, I think she can get away with it because we don't have legitimate journalists out there.
People get their information from one or two places, right, depending on what side of the fence you lean on, or unless you're a rational person, like some of us in the room, who listen to lots of different sources. I don't see the left covering gang violence, Venezuelan gangs in Colorado. I don't see them doing these things. So they don't even know it's an issue. They don't. Mm-hmm. They don't. They may kind of see, like, there's kind of an uptick in our town in this direction, but they don't really see it. So I don't think you're going to sway any of those voters from not voting for Kamala because they don't even know it's an issue.
That's interesting, because she is about to do a 60 Minutes interview. Hypothetically, I'll see it. I'll believe it when I see it. But there would be opportunities for a serious journalist, to your point, to ask her more directly, "Hey, this is an actual problem," and address it. If they're allowed to ask her such questions, do you guys think Kamala is going to be able to grapple with the immigration question in the next couple weeks?
I don't know that it matters, and the reason is because I think that, like, the voters that are able to be swayed, it is such a vanishingly small group of people. I don't know that they are. I don't know. I don't know. But I think that the amount of people that are, that you could actually sway nowadays is such a small amount. I'm not sure what you could, what is the most important thing to them. But if the polls are right and it's the economy and immigration, I don't think that Kamala Harris is in all that good of a position. But that doesn't, when you hear the actual polls of people and stuff, it's like 48-48 or whatever, which is, I mean, I can't believe that that's true, but that's what you keep hearing when you talk to people that are polling.
And I'm glad you're talking about polling, because it's making me think of this report that I heard earlier today, which is pointing out the fact that in addition to not being able to use Starlink or any cell phone service or whatever for getting help that they need, people impacted by hurricanes, are definitely not responding to pollsters. And so the numbers that we're getting out of several major swing states right now, if there are any, are probably inaccurate because there's no way to actually sample a broad enough array of voters. And so it is a good question of what do we know about these people. And I think to your point, the undecided voter right now, if we could figure out what they want to hear, I'm sure they would have told us.
Who even are
Right.
they?
Yes.
I mean, to answer your original question, I don't think there's any way that Kamala Harris can somehow come out with a winning argument on any kind of immigration policy at this point. But like Phil said, whether that matters or not, there is such a slim, sliver of people. Like, we don't even know if they were going to throw their hat in the ring, they probably would have done it by now. So what is going to make them just decide to go and vote one way or the other? Who knows?
Which it's really interesting because she really is in an untenable position, because what she's forced to do is say, I am going forward, if you elect me, I'm going to fix all of these myriad problems that we have that were created under me and Joe Biden.
Yeah.
And so it's just so, and again, the only reason she can get away with this is because the media doesn't hold her feet to the fire and say, wait, a lot of these issues are created under you and Biden, and you want us to think you're the one that's going to fix the issues that only exist because of you?
Intentionally created.
Some of them, but for argument's sake, you don't even need to go that far. It's just they were created under you, and you think we're going to entrust you to fix them? So I just think she's in a very hard position.
I think she is too. I think her dynamic with Biden is also one of the things playing into this. Apparently he did not take well to when during her debate with Trump, she said, well, I am clearly not Joe Biden. Apparently this really, from some sources have said it's really gotten under his skin. And, we've seen kind of odd behavior from Joe Biden over the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, didn't he put a Trump hat on?
He put on a Trump hat.
The past couple of weeks.
Look, but it odder than
Totally
usual.
fine before then.
I'm amazed that we haven't seen him walking around in just a diaper.
But that's the thing. He went on vacation. He was in California for a while. He went to Delaware. He came back, Trump hat. It seems to be not talking to Kamala Harris at all. I mean, I think there is a rift within the Biden-Harris administration. It does not excuse her from the accountability. She put her name on this administration. She should answer for its failures. But I want to talk about one more thing, which is for the first time in his presidency, Joe Biden made a spontaneous appearance in the White House press briefing room today.
The actual one?
Yes, the actual one. We're not sure if he wandered in there on purpose or by mistake, but there's this report from Politico that he was there for about 15 minutes and journalists audibly gasped when he entered, which is not a great sign. But I'm going to pull this from NPR. He talked about a couple different things. I think it's pretty notable that he said he's worried about, Biden says he's worried about violence around the presidential election. President Joe Biden told reporters on Friday he is confident that the election will be free and fair, but he said he was concerned about potential for violence if former President Donald Trump refuses to accept the will of the voters. Quote, I am confident it will be free and fair. I don't know whether it will be peaceful, Biden said during a surprise appearance at the White House daily briefing. The things that Trump has said and the things that he has said last time out when he didn't like the outcomes of the election were dangerous. This is one of the narratives that I think Democrats go back to a lot. And this story has two components, right? Obviously, there were very serious threats to President Trump. And I'll go back to something former First Lady Melania Trump said, which is that everyone who contributes to political violence by saying things like we need to, do horrible things to keep this man out of office, he's a threat to democracy, contribute to this. And so in some ways, Joe Biden is now back in the DNC camp by saying these things. On the other hand, this guy just showed up for the first time. Is he trying to legacy build?
I thought we were supposed to stop listening to him because he wasn't fit. And now Kamala Harris is kind of, by all outward appearances, doing his job and campaigning. And he's just kind of on a press tour of sorts or walking into the Oval, whatever office.
I don't think he goes
why
to
are we
the Oval
listening
office.
to him now?
It's interesting that the left's always talking about political violence and violence in general. I mean, if you pull the uniform crime statistics from the FBI, it very clearly shows who tends to commit the majority of violent crime in this country. And let's just say it's not MAGA Republicans. It's very clear there in the data who commits the violent crimes. We know how they vote. And so it's just very bold of them to talk about violence when they're often the ones perpetuating.
Maybe that's what he meant.
Almost exclusively, whether it be the riots in all of 2020 and then January 6th, which, you know, is bad, but like there was significantly less violence in that one day compared to almost a full year of rioting in hundreds of cities across the country.
And just day-to-day violence in big urban cities like
Clearly.
Baltimore, Maryland, Chicago. I mean, you name it. We know who's perpetuating the violent crimes, and it's not MAGA Republicans. So Biden has a lot of nerve saying that.
I mean, the reason, and it speaks to the fact that both times that both of the attempted assassination or the assassination attempt on Trump, people on the left are so quick to be like, oh, it was a Republican, it was a Trump supporter. And it's like, yeah, Trump supporters are trying to kill Trump, which is the most ridiculous thing. But they know that that to have that association so clearly on top of all the riots, on top of all the violence that comes from the low grade violence that comes from the Democrats, they have to continue to point the finger because the American people kind of know generally that it actually is Democrats that are consistently stoking the violence. They were calling Donald Trump all sorts of names, and whether or not, I mean, there are people that are going to argue and say, you know, stochastic terrorism isn't a thing, and if you what people say doesn't actually impact actions that people take, and I'm sympathetic to that because at the end of the day, you have to put the onus on the person that actually acts. But the idea that spending 4 years or more, or 8 years actually, considering Trump hasn't been in office for the past 4 years, calling Donald Trump Hitler and stuff like that, to think that that isn't going to make the absolutely crazy people do crazy things, or at least influence crazy people to do crazy things. I mean, it is the people that do its fault. They're the ones that are responsible. But the whole reason that people say Donald Trump is Hitler is because they want you to think that Donald Trump would do something as atrocious as Hitler did. It's not like they're saying
it's an implication of
exactly.
like, this guy's really bad.
It's like, it's not just like, oh, you know, he's kind of bad. It's they're associating with one of the worst,
one of the worst people in history.
What was the poll they did? It was at CNN and MSNBC. They said they asked people, would it have been a better thing if Trump's assassination was successful? And it was a very high number of people who said, yes, it would have been better for the country. Like, that's the mindset of these people. So whether they're the person, you know, on the hill or not, or hiding in the bushes,
people that said that?
it was really, I think it was in the 30s.
I've heard 27%. I've also listened to a podcast where a pollster was like, well, that you have to take out these people, and like tried to walk it back down. Because I think it is even shocking to mainstream researchers and journalists. Like, even though they themselves do not like Trump, I think the idea that people are open to such a tragic thing being positive is not the direction anyone wants the country to go, or at least the majority of people don't.
It's like words have meanings and they have effect. And if you keep repeating them over and over again, you're going to convince people that something truly evil is good.
It is also interesting to me that Biden is specifically bringing up this narrative of, Trump denying the results of the last election or whatever, and this being an imminent threat to this year's election. This was something that came up a lot after J.D. Vance just really annihilated the debate earlier this week, in part because it was one of the only moments where he was in a tough position. They asked him about Trump's comments and things like that. And he, I thought, did a totally okay job, but had to sort of say, like, we're going to move on peacefully, kind of move past this point. And it was something that corporate media definitely latched onto and was like, he couldn't answer. He didn't disavow what Trump said. This is happening all again. Where is Mike Pence when we need him? Because they loved Mike Pence when he was in office, I'm sure. Is this one of these final issues that Democrats are bringing up during our final weeks before the election because they think it invokes fear and that's enough to motivate voters to stay away from?
I think it's all they have.
Really?
Literally all they have. Because what else is there?
Abortion, I guess. That's the other thing they always bring up.
Oh, so murder and murder. Awesome.
It would be nice if the moderators asked Kamala Harris or Waltz, especially Waltz, being in Minnesota and Minneapolis, about violence, since it was Democrats that were torching cities and torching small businesses and being extremely violent across the country, but not a word about violence despite all of that and despite Waltz being there as the governor of Minnesota, but they're asking Vance about it. So again, it's just really weird how the media and the moderators in this case can shape the narrative by painting Trump and Vance as these kind of nefarious villains that are in charge of all of this political violence, when again, if you were to just look at the data and just turn on your TV, you would see who is torching inner cities and shooting people every day.
Did we ever get to the bottom of whether Tim Walz is friends with school shooters or not?
He said he was.
Clarify that?
I mean, he said he was.
He said
He was pro-trans.
that
so.
he misspoke and he meant he was friends with the victims or people who have been impacted by school
Oh.
shootings. And then he referenced David Hogg. So I don't know. It was a weird answer. JD Walz is a weird character. They say vice presidents don't win the election, but in this case, I really think that Walz is creating more obstacles for Kamala Harris, and JD Vance, especially given this week's performance, is really strengthening the ticket.
Well, he's touring with Fetterman now instead of Harris, right? So he's kind of in timeout.
Oh no!
He's with
Is he really touring with Fetterman?
Oh,
Is he still vertical, Fetterman?
John
he
Fetterman
made a recovery.
He's kind of hilarious.
He actually made a recovery. I think the stroke actually put things back in order.
Do you guys expect to see Biden return to the campaign trail at all?
Is there going to be ice cream and small children?
What would his part be?
Disavow. He did do.
Disavow.
Look, I want to keep my job and I want to keep this show on the air. The thing is, he did do one official. They did like a joint. They did a joint appearance as president and vice president right after she got moved onto the top of the ticket. And then a couple weeks later, after the DNC, he did one campaign event where he spoke before her. And so if you
So
were
he
Joe
opened for her.
Biden, right, he opened for her. The sitting president of the United States opened for the vice president and a different political candidate. To me, this screams disrespect. I know Joe Biden might not be all together, but like there has to be a point where he just formally breaks up with Harris, yes?
I would hope.
So this presser he did it's very catty. If you listen to what he said, everything that I did, Harris did with me. We are a team. We're following the same playbook.
That's great.
It's amazing. He really does tie her to his administration. She is trying so hard. I mean, this was true in her debate with Trump, right? She would say, we did so much because she can't say Biden's name, but she can't take solo credit. But then also is like, I am clearly not Joe Biden. I mean, I'm glad that he honestly
What
is
you should
getting
do is
mad.
say, like, I created all these problems. I'm the only one who knows how to solve them.
He woke up from a nap one day and found out he wasn't running for office.
I know. Can you imagine? So we think that that Biden will just stay in the White House and say nothing, or are we getting a bunch of off-the-cuff remarks? Where
He
he's
has to stay
there's-
in the White House so he can pardon his son. That's the only reason he's still in there.
No, I mean, well, as far as the campaign goes, they're actually sending him on trips now to keep him away from the campaign. I just heard about it today. I'm actually looking for it right now, but he's got a couple trips coming up. And it's because they don't want him to be on the campaign trail because he's absolutely incapable of, forming coherent sentences.
and now he hates Harris. Like he's a liability for the campaign in so many ways.
If
Yeah,
you need
I mean,
any
he
more
is.
proof that the media doesn't do their job, it's the fact that he can go up there and literally make no sense for 25 minutes, incapable of, stringing 10 words together, and the media doesn't say anything. They'll actually replay some of his clips that make no sense, and they will not comment on it or say, oh, Biden wasn't making much sense there. They'll actually sum up what he was trying to say for him and regurgitate it to us. David Muir's a professional because I watch ABC Nightly News at 5:30 with him all the time, and they just skip right over it. And so I don't think there's a more glaring example of them not doing their job than how they ignore Biden's utter incompetence and the fact that he's clearly senile and clearly dealing with some kind of dementia or Alzheimer's. I mean, it's terrible. It's embarrassing.
So do you think the DNC is just bad at their job? my hypothesis is here, did they just think they could slip Joe Biden by? They weren't aware of his cognitive decline in 2020 when they tapped him to be their nominee? Or have they always known and they're just, kind of like, we can make it work, it's fine? Like, what is the DNC's role here?
I remember back then, even 4 years ago, I remember being aware that Biden, something was cognitively not right, but it was not this bad. It has definitely gotten progressively worse as each year has gone by. But I think he was the only tenable candidate that they guessed correctly could take on Trump and beat him. And so they said, you know what, there's issues here, but he's the only tenable candidate we have. And so they just went with it. So yes, I think they're on notice. I think they're aware of it. Did they know he was going to decline this much during his presidency? I don't know, but it's egregious that they then tried to run him again in 2024. They're definitely aware of it then, but they did the right thing by having the right thing, I'd put in quotation marks, by having Kamala step in for him. But yeah, everyone was aware of it in 2020, but especially now in 2024, it's just so glaringly obvious. I mean, as you said, he literally cannot talk for more than 5 seconds. And
that's why he only did a 15-minute appearance in the briefing room today. And I think you're right. Right in this sense, meaning most strategic move to serve their interests. And I think this is one of the things that undecided voters or Democrat or voters that would be independent, maybe lean Democrat, notice. I've heard interviews with voters saying, we didn't choose her. I wish that we had been involved in the process. She did just get selected by, quote, them. And
they wasn't selected ever.
They stepped on their own toes because they only chose her as vice president because she fit identity politics, right? Is she black? Is she Indian? I don't know. Depends on the day, I guess. But she fit a narrative. She fit the ticket, right? They were not going to overstep her either. There was a bunch of debate on who was going to take over Joe's spot because that was what's going to happen. Be like, oh, it's going to be Hillary. She'll step up. It's going to be, they cannot step past her because they put themselves in the trick box, right? You can't pass over a black woman. Now they're stuck with her.
Yeah, and I think in some ways she is. She doesn't have the same problems as Joe Biden, but she is not better. She is a challenge too. Sticking with some campaign news and talking about our sweet friend Kamala Harris, I'm gonna bring up this report from the Post Millennial. Key Kamala staffers weren't aware of Tim Walz's false claims until they were made public. It was reported that, quote, key members of Harris's circle weren't aware of some of the inaccurate statements from Walz, quote, until they became public. Kamala Harris's vice presidential running mate, Tim Walz, has claimed that he carried weapons in combat that he and his wife conceived using IVF, claimed that he was a command sergeant major in the National Guard when he was actually reduced to a master sergeant when he retired. And it turns out that some of Harris's campaign's key staffers weren't aware of any of these things until they were made clear. Walz's false statements have ranged from his background in the National Guard to other facets of career, such as when he claimed to be teaching students in Hong Kong while the Tiananmen Square massacre took place. According to news from Politico, quote, key members of the Harris circle weren't aware of some of the inaccurate statements from Walz until they became public. Many of the issues were not raised, quote, despite vetting process for Harris's VP pick.
Is his name even Tim Walz?
They're not
At
sure.
this point, I have to ask.
Also, someone's job is to professionally vet these candidates.
Right.
I will say some of these claims he did sort of make after. Like if you're trying to play devil's advocate and in favor of the staffers, maybe a couple of them, I don't know. There's actually really no defending this. And it comes a couple weeks after this report from the New York Post. It says Kamala Harris says insomnia hit after Biden dropped out. Quote, she was sleep deprived the day they picked Tim Walz. I don't know if you guys saw this, but it's basically Kamala Harris was saying, from the time the president called me and told me he wasn't running. I mean, it was just like everything was in speedy motion, and I was not sleeping well. She told the basketball star she's appearing on the All Smoke podcast. Quote, and then that one morning, I had, I don't know, a few hours sleep, and I like to sleep.
Oh, yeah.
I just got up. She said, I was like, so I just went out and got a pork roast and started marinating it.
What?
For her very Jewish
Did
husband.
she really just see what really happened was?
She got a pork roast for her very Jewish husband.
As a Jew, I take offense to the fact that he's even married to her. I do, when things aren't a meritocracy with the left and when they pick people, it's all about identity politics. And so it's like giving the bid to the lowest bidder for a government contract. You're going to get the worst. And so because nothing with the left is about meritocracy or who's qualified, you end up in this situation where you have Kamala Harris, who isn't qualified, picking Waltz, who isn't qualified, and that's how we end up where we're at right now. And that's just something that I find odious with the left, is because it's all about, your appearance and things like that. It's always going to end badly. And I feel like the Republicans, for the most part, tend to put the most competent people up there. And we're also seeing it with FEMA and Pete Buttigieg, who was chosen because of his sexual orientation instead of his competency. And so things start playing out like this, where it's just disaster after disaster. And I think it's totally predictable.
Did you always feel this way, that identity politics was leading Democratic staffing choices, or is this something you feel more recently?
I remember it with staffing choices. I would say I've only been cognizant of it, in the last 4 or 5 years. But I think we're definitely going down a road where it keeps getting more and more absurd. I mean, you look at the NASA gentleman, or maybe it was non-binary, who was stealing people's luggage, and that turned into a huge fiasco for the Biden administration. Very embarrassing.
I can't help but feel like he has my luggage, because I lost a bag that year and it was at that airport.
It probably was him.
You have to stalk his Instagram, see
He
if
was
he posted photos in your clothes.
charged of nuclear or something,
A lot
right?
of Zara in there.
But even if you look at the TikTok influencers that the Biden administration hires, they're just, what they have going on, it's just pretty embarrassing. So yes, I would say it's definitely gotten worse, and I think it's only going to continue to get worse. And it's one of the things that I loathe the most about the left, is that, it's not based on character. It's not based on things that as a country we've always valued. It's now just based on what's your orientation, what's your skin color, and it's just so insulting, and it leads to results like this, where you have Tim Waltz claiming he was at Tiananmen Square. It's just really bizarre. I don't know how more people aren't upset about it and offended by it.
The worst part about this with Kamala saying I only had a few hours of sleep, does she know the job she's running for? Because sometimes you have to make quick decisions, and they have to be good decisions. That's the job she's running for. She's telling us, well, I didn't really know what I was doing. I kind of just, picked him, I guess.
I think it's pretty clear that, the current administration is more a committee run situation, and I think that's not going to change should Kamala Harris actually, win and get into office. There again, this speaks to the fact that there is no one held accountable. If you have a situation where there are multiple people that are doing the job as opposed to one person, it's much easier to go ahead and just pass the buck, and it's much easier for other people around them to say, well, we don't really know who we can hold accountable. When it's just one person and it's clearly the decision is made by the executive, then it's very easy to be like, well, you're the one who made the call. And yet you've got Kamala Harris saying that she was the last, I forget what for the Afghanistan, she was the last one in the room. And what happened? Nothing has changed. There has been no one held accountable for a totally botched withdrawal. Completely and totally botched. And the reason it was botched is because they just didn't want to do what Donald Trump did. Like, they came into office and they just wanted to change everything that the Trump administration had, whether it was good policy or bad policy. It was just like, if it's Donald Trump's policy, change it because we're not Donald Trump. And we have seen significant negative repercussions because of that.
It was very spiteful. I mean,
Yeah.
it's really, we are not Donald Trump and we're going to do all these things, especially when quietly there were either some things they left in place or they reversed. Like, famously, Trump called out you're saying my tariffs are bad, but the tariffs are still in place. I think
the policy on the cost of insulin. Trump changed it. Trump had a policy in place that was working. They changed it and then changed it back. The whole talking about the border, they let the border go for 3 years before they even mentioned it. There's no problem at the border. No problem at the border. No problem at the border. 10 million people came into the United States, unaccounted for. I think
There
it's
wasn't a problem
300.
until Texas tried to fix it.
Yeah, 300,000 people that are actually criminals that have some kind of criminal record, and I think it was like 10 or 15,000 people that were murderers. It's just unconscionable. It's absolutely unconscionable.
And when Texas tried to fix it, they fought them. I mean,
Yeah.
it was
DOJ sued
amazing.
them for it, yeah.
Right. It was amazing watching this fight over the buoys in the Rio Grande Valley, which they tried initially to say, it's an environmental issue. Actually, just kidding. You don't have the authority to put them there. Actually, we don't want you to do that. I mean, I thought it was one of Greg Abbott's best moments when he was like, Texas has an obligation to secure its border for its people.
It's like the government was just going around hypothetically lighting fires and then like saying, no, you can't put that out. I'm gonna light another one over here.
But Kamala Harris is saying, I'm the change candidate. Even though I'm currently part of this administration, things will change under me. I mean, this doesn't seem to be a winning
Disavowed
mantra.
her pick for vice president. Is she going to pick somebody else now? Like, now
Well,
where do we go?
and when you saw in the lead up to the debate, there were a couple stories came out. Even though he said he was a really great debater, that's what Minnesotans have said they had known him as. That Walz was having panic attacks, that he was really nervous. I mean, there's obviously a relationship between the DNC and the media, but there were clearly attempts with Harris and Walz before both debates to lower the bar, and I find that interesting. So not only can we hold you to a high standard, we can't even hold you to your word, and also we can't even hold you to your promises because you won't tell us what your policies are.
Yeah, it's hard to say that you're going to be a solution to all the problems when you're the genesis of all the problems. And again, she's just backed herself against the wall with this, but, her feet aren't held to the fire by the media or the moderators. And they're really just the fact that they went advance and said, so are you going to deport the people that are here? What is your plan? Why was there not a question to Walz about why there were all of these people that were here illegally? And they did the same thing in the Trump-Harris debate. They asked Trump, so what are you going to do? Are you going to deport people? Are you going to be knocking on doors? Not one question to the person who got us in this situation, Kamala Harris, about why did you let all of the people in here so that Trump is forced to deport them? And again, it's just egregious and shameful, and it's just so blatantly obvious. The media doesn't even try to hide that they're asking these loaded, biased questions, and it makes it so much easier for Walz and Harris, and yet Walz still managed to completely fumble the ball, look incompetent, despite getting all of these assists from the two female moderators.
Mm-hmm. Do you think Walz is someone voters respond to? Because there are polls that indicate that he's likable, right? They feel like he is personable, that there's something about him in interviews, and I feel like that's not the case with Kamala Harris. She is specifically unpersonable. On the other hand, he is a liar. He doesn't tell the truth. He gets caught regularly. Is his personality enough for people to get past the falsehoods?
I don't like his personality. Me.
I don't either, but that's what the polls say.
Personally, he makes my skin crawl. He makes me feel uncomfortable just looking at him, and his eyes bulging out of his head, and his gesticulations and his movements and his shoulder movements. He makes me very uncomfortable. So I don't know the type of people he's putting at ease or making comfortable, but I'd almost want to question them.
Yeah, I know.
And I don't know if they should be voting, but he makes me really uncomfortable, and everyone else here, I don't know. Do you guys feel the same?
The way he enters a stage, the sashaying he does, no one walks like that.
I watched a 17-minute
unnatural.
speech he gave once, and it was like hard to watch it.
Well, when did he give the speech?
I don't know. I think it was his acceptance speech, and I was just like, this is really hard to watch. I don't know why. Just very uncomfortable guy to watch.
He's an odd guy. There was, and again, because he often gets caught misspeaking, and that's complete quotes for everybody who's just listening and not watching. He gets caught, and sort of everyone lets it go. Some people will start to acknowledge it, not really. But it makes it so whenever he gives a personal anecdote, I feel like we all have to be like, somebody double check that. And I hate to say this, I really do. But he gave that story during the debate about his 17-year-old son witnessing a shooting at a community center. And that's horrible. That's awful. But because it's Tim Walz, I find myself having to be like,
I was thinking the immediately same thing.
You were?
Yeah. I felt bad about it.
Do voters want this for 4 years? It doesn't matter because
No.
Mike Pence kind of faded to the background. Kamala Harris faded to the background. Like, will Tim Walz just fade to the background if Harris is elected?
I don't think it matters because I don't think people vote for the vice president. Historically, people don't vote for the vice president. They vote for the top of the ticket. And I think that, regardless of how poorly or well Walz does at a debate, I think that people are going to look at Kamala Harris's record as the vice president, even though the vice president is largely a powerless, situation, position. They can look at her voting history in the Senate. They can look at how she behaved as the AG in California, the policies that she's endorsed, and you can see that everything that she has ever believed has changed because those policies are significantly unpopular in the United States with the people as it is. So I don't think that Walz matters much.
Walz is the opening band for the ticket concert of the person you actually want to see perform. Like the VP, people don't really know. They don't really care about. They don't. People who are deeply entrenched in politics can want to watch the VP debates, but I guarantee it was probably 10% of the viewership of Trump and Kamala.
They're looking to see if that person has a future.
Well, and historically, the VP position has been just a figurehead, as you pointed out earlier. It's just a figurehead position. There's not much substance to it, but occasionally, as history has shown, the VP has to step in, like with LBJ, and now we saw it with Kamala Harris. So I would argue that the VP position actually is very important because if something happens to the president, obviously they're next in line. So I think we do need to vet these people and look with a lot of scrutiny at who they are, and just watching kind of Walz's track record in Minnesota, I don't think it's very good, and he's not the type of person that I would want as a leader. I think he says and does a lot of things because it's virtue signaling, and I think like most people on the left, he lives to virtue signal, and I just inherently don't trust people that go around virtue signaling all the time, and he's the best of them.
It's also kind of weird because I feel like if Kamala were to win and have Tim Walz, we would just have like a team of VPs. Two VP.
Yeah, it is. It's co-VP-ship. I mean, and does that speak to the fact that neither one of them convey leadership? Like you referenced Tim Walz's opening or his acceptance speech earlier. I remember seeing clips from that. I remember watching it. But when they walked on stage, he looked, I mean, and maybe it's just because he's a man and he's bigger, but he looked more in command than she did. I think this pretty frequently. It's my personal opinion that she is... she seems to struggle with her self-esteem, and she does not seem to handle things independently.
She had a custom
with
lectern
strength.
made for the debates.
I heard that.
Right. She brought Tim Walz to the only interview the first interview she finally gave. She had to have a male bodyguard and/or
Support animal.
support puppy, I guess. It's very weird.
And if you watched her interview with Oprah not long ago, I mean, she rivals Biden when it comes to utter incompetence and their lack of oratory skills. And she was absolutely terrible in that interview and said a whole lot of nothing, which she seems to specialize in. Mm-hmm. And so, again, I think if the media actually did their job, more people would be aware of how incompetent she is, because it's a lot of word salad and she says a whole lot of nothing. And you know what? It's actually helping her because no one knows where she stands on any issues because she never says anything about anything. And I think that kind of amorphous, nebulous platform that she's now running on may actually help her again with the assist of the media.
It's like she speaks in riddles.
Yeah.
It could be taken any way.
Yeah.
So you think it's enough to run a vibes campaign?
I think right now it seems to be working against Donald Trump. I don't think she necessarily needs to have a well-defined, crystallized, elucidated platform. She clearly doesn't. She doesn't have any solutions for the economy. She hasn't articulated any solutions for the border. In her debate with Donald Trump, she didn't posit any good policy positions, yet somehow she's neck and neck with Trump in a lot of states and even beating him. So based on the data, yeah, it's working for her.
I think that it's clearly been a situation where a vibes candidate is acceptable. I think that's what got President Obama elected. Yeah. Obama's entire Hope and Change platform allowed the listener to insert what Hope and Change meant to them into what Obama was saying. So his entire campaign was platitudes and hope and change, and it was crafted so well, and he's such a great orator that the listener could just say, well, this is what he's saying, even though he never said that. You were just imparting what you wanted, what you thought hope and change meant. So it's been this way for, I mean, and he arguably, even George Bush, like when he won in 2000, you talk to people and people were like, well, you know, he's the guy I want to have a beer with. And I think that people, even people that think that they are like, mostly reasonable and rational, I think that, most people actually vote with their gut and vote based on vibes more than they do but based on policy. There are some people, like people that are into politics, sure, but it's like 2 or 3% of the population. And you've got everybody in the United States that's over 18 can vote, So, I mean,
and Trump has a strong vibe. I mean, there are people
absolutely
who love Trump's vibe, especially when it was fresh and on the scene in 2016.
I think vibes is not like, I think that vibes is more than just enough. I think vibes is what you have to have. Mm-hmm. If you're a policy wonk, like they call you a policy wonk, and you don't really relate to people, right, and you'll lose. So I think vibes are not just, enough. I think that it's more important to be able to have an ability to communicate with people in a way that they feel like you're going to provide them with what they're looking for, whatever that is.
This was the DeSantis campaign.
That's what I was going to say. Yeah. It reminds me of this feedback that he wasn't able to talk.
Policy genius.
Yeah.
Right. He's got great policies, but he's maybe more introverted or not able to just have the charisma. Because that's what you're saying. It's not that Obama exclusively ran a vibes campaign, but he had the charisma to sell the vibe.
Arguments against universal enfranchisement. Mm. I mean... I don't know of a better, solution, but the idea that democracy is the be all end all. I mean, look, man, if people are like, well, I'm going to vote for that guy because I'd like to have a beer with him. It's like, really?
And he's, speaking of having beers with people, we in Chicago, we can never have a beer with Obama because he fled and went to California, and now he's living in an $11 million mansion, which is really odd. So anyways, yeah, it just seems like he's a little hypocritical, and Obama, I feel like, is the king of preaching how it's rules for thee but not for me, and it's just so interesting how after his presidency he's now living in California.
Would anybody want to have a beer with Tim Walz or Kamala Harris?
I wouldn't.
At this table?
That would be weird.
Yeah, totally would not.
I mean, there is bias at this table, though, because...
Yeah, I know, but it's just so weird for me because, like, watching that speech was like I was getting my gut feeling was like, this is not a good...
I don't want to hang out with him.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, he gave me the creeps.
It's like in any other profession, do you think you'd have a positive interaction? If Kamala Harris was your like realtor, do you think it would be a positive experience? If Tim Walz was your kid's assistant football coach, do you think it would be a positive experience?
I don't know.
I don't know if they have the charisma to sell me on that.
I mean, I'm not buying a car from Trump.
That's a good point.
Well, I think this, like, I have to have a beer with this person is for good time American politics. I think right now we're in a lot of, we're on the brink of a lot of really serious questions, and we face turmoil internationally as well as on our own southern border. And so in some ways, I wonder if, while the vibe and the gut instinct is sort of undeniable, that reality of, like, in a time of crisis, are you going to say, look, I don't actually want to hang out with you, but I think you're the best for the job and I want the job fixed?
I don't think that things are bad enough to make people decide that they want to.
You don't think the economy is?
Not bad enough, no.
I think that relatability is more difficult this election cycle than it's ever been. We used to be able, so I can agree with that guy, right? Most people can't afford their groceries. Have you seen the housing market? It is tanking. Houses are staying on longer and longer. Price drops are all over the place. Go to Zillow.
Another thing, if you look at the stock market's like reached all-time highs or whatever, and it continuously does that. But if you take out like 7 of the biggest stocks and you look at the stock market without those stocks, it's underwater. And it's like Google and Apple and Amazon and just a handful of companies are actually keeping the entire stock market afloat.
Yeah, it's the FANG stocks. They're keeping the NASDAQ and the S&P 500 afloat. And like you said, it's just a handful of them. But it's very interesting, circling back to Kamala, that she wants us to think that starting January 10th, she's going to fix all of the problems going on in the country, but she can't fix them now. And so again, it just calls into question, why should we entrust you to fix these problems when you're in office now and they're just getting worse?
Because she's Brad.
I don't think that's enough. I also think she can't divorce herself from the Biden legacy no matter what. I mean, unless she comes out and says, Joe Biden wouldn't let me anywhere at all, and I wasn't allowed to influence the campaign, and that's why it wasn't effective, which she won't do because she's already said, well, I was in the room.
And he'll come out and do a press and be like, well, actually, yes, she was, and I did let her do these things. And
maybe I do want this to happen. Actually.
yeah, well, it's kind of entertaining.
Yeah, it would make a very interesting October for sure. I want to jump to this next story before we head over to Super Chats. This one's also from the Post Millennial. Hi, Libby, if you're watching. San Jose women's volleyball player receives death threats after supporting competitors' boycott of her own team due to trans player.
Bro.
Quote, reading that, it sends chills through me at first, just because that's something threatening to me, that's someone threatening to physically harm me. The co-captain of the San Jose State women's volleyball team has reportedly received death threats after she spoke out against the inclusion of biological males on the women's sports teams. Brooke Slusser plays on the same team as a trans-identified male, Blair Fleming, and 3 teams have pulled out of competing against the team. Slusser has joined with over a dozen other female athletes in a class action lawsuit against the NCAA for Title IX violations over inclusions of biological males on women's sports team, according to Outkick reports. The lawsuit was originally filed in March with athletes such as the former University of Kentucky swimmer Riley Gaines, Olympian Rika Gorgi, and 2-time NCAA champion Kylie Allen's joining in. I'm so glad maybe someone who's interested in gender issues is here tonight, because I do think that this is something that we as a culture have had to take more and more seriously. And similarly to maybe the immigration crisis, which at one time people were like, well, people are in need, they need help, we just have to be compassionate, we have to be kind. We're now seeing people say, actually, this is not compassionate or kind, and it's harming people. It's not effective. I think there is a similar tenor to this realization that saying, oh, well, like maybe we'll just let them live their lives how they want to is not the solution, especially when you have these large funded programs that young women work really hard for the opportunities to take part in.
Yeah, well, as a trans woman, I feel really strongly about this. As you said, it's kind of hit an inflection point where it started out as kind of like, oh, we'll just be kind and compassionate. And now it's kind of reached this boiling over point. And I think with this, I've said it before, I've been asked a number of times, Josh, as a trans woman, what do you think? Should you be playing in a men's league or a women's league? And I've always said we need our own independent league, because our biology was unfortunately assigned male at birth, and our muscular structure and our anatomy obviously is male. And because there's just so many nuances with this, and I think because of it, it's not appropriate for us to play in a men's league or a women's league. I think we need our own trans league. I think trans men should play with other trans men, and I think trans women like me should play with other trans women. And I feel like that's the only fair compromise, because when you have trans women like me playing against biological women, there is kind of an unfair advantage in certain aspects. And so I think it's okay to talk about that and discuss it and even disagree with other people about it. The left, wants everyone to kind of think the same, and they don't like open dialogue and discussion and civic discourse, but it's okay to talk about these things and to disagree with people about them. So my solution would be give us our own league, but I'm interested what you guys think.
Well, first of all, I'm sorry that you were born a white male. They're the worst. I feel sorry for you. My bigger issue is it's not just the sports. It's the locker rooms, right? It's the privacy of these women who are changing out with men. I have an issue with that. If I had a daughter, I don't have any daughters, but I would have an issue with that. So that's kind of where I start. I think we have a lot of these conversations at sports, their scholarships, all those things are important. I'm more concerned about the safety.
You have 5 boys?
I do.
Wow.
Yeah, I aimed left every time.
So, and you already assigned their gender at birth. They haven't chosen their gender
Well, they were
yet?
born with a penis,
Okay.
so
All right. Do you think maybe they'll choose their gender down the road and it might be different?
not in my household.
Do you feel like this is something I don't know if you homeschool or if your kids go to public school or anything, but do you think this is something that teenagers are having a conversation around? Because there is, a generational difference in how they view gender ideology, partially because younger students have been more exposed to it, and maybe there's a level of acceptance that they feel culturally. On the other hand, we do have a lot of young high school age girls who are saying, I am uncomfortable. I do not feel like this is a safe and appropriate environment for me, and feeling as though the administrations at their high schools don't support them.
Well, I mean, I'll start with saying, like, if you're an adult, make your decisions. I really don't care because you're an adult and you have self-autonomy. Go live your life, right? It's the schools I have an issue with. My kids all go to public school, and I send them to public school because a lot of kids that go to school will never hear a message of conservatism. So my kids are emissaries. My kids are ambassadors. They are missionaries to go to these places and tell the woes of communism and just common sense to these kids, because who's teaching them? Because they're not getting it at their households. And I certainly can't go. They won't have me. So my kids go and deliver that message. As far as the rhetoric at their schools, it has shifted a lot since they were in middle school to high school. The rhetoric now is shifting a lot more towards anti-wokeism. Can I say the G and R on this podcast?
I don't know. Probably not.
Probably not. Okay. Well, the G and R is flippantly used at high school now, all over the place. It reminds me of a rebirth of the 90s.
Interesting. I mean, I know that Gen Z loves 90s fashion, so that's not entirely surprising to me. Will the culture come with it? Do you have any kids? Do you have a plan on how you would address this?
I don't, but I was homeschooled my whole life. So in the 90s, my father took my two brothers out of elementary school because him and my mom weren't happy with the books they were being sent home with. They're very ideological.
In the 90s, huh?
Yeah, this was 1993, 1992 actually, and the books were like Why Timmy Has Two Daddies, just things that, they thought they'd be reading.
How old were they?
Huckleberry Finn. They were like 8 and 6 years old. I was 4. And so my parents yanked them out, and I was homeschooled my entire life with the exception of 1 year when I begged my parents to go to public school as a sophomore. And I went, and it was not very fun. But my parents recognized even early on in the 90s how bad the schools were getting and how they're moving away from kind of the intelligentsia and the academic-oriented nature that they had always been, in which they should be as educational institutions, and were becoming much more politicized and much more ideological. And I think it has only gotten worse, to answer your question. And so if I did have kids, I would... obviously I wouldn't have the child. Trans men can get pregnant. I can't as a trans woman. But if I, as a woman, got another woman pregnant and had children with her, I would probably homeschool them, because I don't trust educational institutions to be educational anymore. And I think that's a sad indictment on where we're at as a country. And I know Trump's made comments about how he would defund the Department of Education. And so there's this whole debate around it, and vouchers, to go to private schools, charter schools, because public schools are so bad. So I think you have both crime and violence in public schools now is getting worse, and the politicization of public schools. So it's definitely tough. I don't think I would want to send my kids to public school, maybe a private school, but they're so expensive. It's almost prohibitive to send your kids to private school if you're middle income. So I think it's definitely an issue, and it's sad.
Do you think in this case, there is a difference between the policies in place for dealing with transgender identifying students in high school versus college? And the distinction I'm obviously drawing is that in one environment, the majority of people involved are minors, right? All of the students involved are, if at the oldest 18, the majority of them are younger. But in college, you were saying before, if you're an adult, you want to live the way you live, maybe that's fine. In college, presumably everyone is an adult. Does it make a difference in our policies when it's only involving adults, even though it's an educational institution? I'm hitting you with the tough questions tonight.
That is a tough question. I definitely think I think minors should be protected above and beyond. I think as adults, I don't really know, because the libertarian side of me says I don't think that we should stop people from playing sports. If they want to put on a dress and feel pretty, okay, whatever. But there's also the physical differences, right? You don't want to have, men stepping in the ring and beating up women. So there are issues there. I honestly don't know where I land on it.
And it's interesting because the majority of universities in the country, I'm assuming, I can bet pretty easily that San Jose State University is one of them, receive some form of government funding, right? So if you are relying on revenue that is generated by the tax base, and this is not an issue that the tax base has a shared opinion on, right? A lot of people don't agree on this on transgender ideology and how to accommodate different athletes. I mean, you offered a solution that not everyone does. A lot of the narrative is like you either let biological males who identify as women on the team, or you're bigoted, but not. I feel like it's not as common to say, well, maybe they should just have their own league. And so in some ways, to me, colleges, even though everyone's an adult, I know I asked you this question, but I'm thinking about it myself. Even though everyone's an adult at the university level, I don't know that as a taxpayer, I want to have funding going to universities that are making these decisions without my consent.
I could see that. It's also, I just think it's selfish of them. At the end of the day, right? I mean, if you want to express yourself that way, whatever, that's fine. But why do I have to play along with it? I guess that's kind of my issue with it. If I had one.
Yeah. It is interesting. Are you going to say something?
I was just going to say, I mean, trans women are called trans women for a reason. They're transitioning. They don't all have to transition. The medical guidelines make it clear that you can be trans without transitioning. You just have to have a gender identity that differs from your sex assigned at birth. But trans women are typically transitioning from one sex or one gender to another. And so it's very hard to argue that trans women are the exact same as biological women, because by necessity, a prerequisite of us being trans women is we were once men. And you can't erase that, and you can't negate it. And I think it's insulting when the left tries to negate it and say trans women are women. We are trans women, hence the name, hence why we differentiate between trans women and cis or biological women. And so I don't like that the left is not consistent on this, and I think it's not fair that they try to erase our transness by saying trans women are women. We're trans women. And because of that, I think it's only fair that we have our own league. And I think that's the most fair solution. But it's just a very nuanced issue, and it's tough. I don't know what the answer is. There isn't a panacea for this, or we already would have had it at the collegiate and professional level. I don't, and there's also intersex people.
Well,
what do we do with intersex people?
And I knew, I went to a really small public high school in sort of a rural area, and not all programs exist if not enough people are participating, right? So like if you don't have enough kids sign up for certain classes, you don't have them. If you don't have enough people signing up for a team, the team goes away. And so in some ways, I think the counter argument to they should have their own league or team is to say, well, then they wouldn't have enough players to field, a competitive
But at the same time,
team.
there wasn't enough lacrosse players at my high school, so we had like a club lacrosse team that had all 4 of our high schools combined into one team. So
That's what they did with football in my high school.
They also draw analogies to separate but equal. Oh, if trans people have their own league, it's like separate but equal in the 1950s and Plessy v. Ferguson and Brown v. Board of Education, and this is going to be bad, and we're just going back to, 7 decades ago. But I don't think it's a separate but equal situation. I think it absolutely has to be separate. When it came to black and white people, it didn't need to be separate by necessity, by nature. For this, by nature, I think it's only fair if it is separate and we have our own league. So I think that's unfair to analogize it to the separate but equal thing in the 50s. Again, I think that's just a way to silence people and to chill the conversation by insinuating that they're bigoted or that they're somehow racist if we think trans people should have our own league. I actually think us having our own league is very empowering. I don't think there's anything negative about it.
Yeah, I saw that movie, A League of Their Own. It was very inspirational. They were really into having their own team. I'm curious to get your perspective on this. What is the relationship between transgender women and feminism?
Yeah, it depends who you ask, right? Because we're not a monolith and we don't all think the same. I'm a libertarian inclined trans woman. I have a libertarian ethic. But a lot are ideologues on the left and they subscribe to woke ideology. I don't. So I think everybody's opinion is different. Sorry, what was the original question?
I was asking what's the relationship between transgender women and feminism?
Right. So a lot would argue that that trans women are women, and so they're just part of the feminist movement and the feminist ethic. It's called liberal feminism, or I think new wave feminism, and it differs from the feminism of the 1960s, where it was women just trying to get equal rights with men and to be considered equal. And so, again, it's a very nuanced, difficult situation where we have women who are claiming that they're being erased by biological men and being mansplained to by biological men identifying as women, and they feel like our rights are in direct opposition to their rights, and that trans women are actually erasing cis or biological women. And so it depends who you talk to. I think biological women make some very valid points that they're being silenced and erased by the postmodern trans movement. I don't want to opine on that. I just feel like trans women are trans women and biological women are biological women. And I do understand that they feel like they're being pushed out of spaces that were traditionally reserved for women only.
Do you think that it's fair for people to believe that the push for transgender ideology, this belief in the flexibility of genders, is ultimately to erase gender from society overall?
I think people could back that up. I think that you could make that argument and show that that's happening. I'm just a trans woman trying to live my life, so I try not to get too involved in the political side of it. But again, I understand why biological women take umbrage at their spaces being encroached upon by people who sadly were assigned male at birth, but we identify as women. And so I understand their complaints and I hear them, but we're in a tough position because we feel this way. And I understand that some of us might have gender dysphoria, which is, categorized as a mental illness under the DSM-5.
Is it in the 5 now,
It's the 5 now, and I get that, and so they'll make claims, oh, you guys are just mentally ill and you need help and you need therapy.
That's the argument for gender reassignment surgery.
Is gender dysphoria.
They have gender dysphoria. The surgery relieves them of the stress that they get from seeing, the quote unquote wrong genitalia. So without gender dysphoria, there's no reason.
Well, actually, you're wrong on that. So the medical literature, whether you look at WHO, NIH, NHS, WPATH, transequality.org, or any of the medical guidelines, all say that you don't have to have gender dysphoria to be trans. You don't have to transition to be trans.
I'm saying that's the argument for the surgeries.
For the surgeries?
Yeah, the argument for the surgery is
typically
if
gender dysphoria.
you have gender dysphoria and you get the surgery to alleviate the symptoms of gender dysphoria.
Yes, correct. The data tends to suggest that surgeries don't always solve the problem, and there's still very high rates of self-harm for people that have undergone the surgeries. So, yeah, it's just a very tough issue.
And Hannah Claire, to answer your question, they're called gender abolitionists. And yes, there are a significant portion of people on the left that do believe that gender is, because it's a social construct, it's something that you can just disregard and we should move beyond it. I think that's crazy, but
it's something that Phyllis Schlafly warned against when she was campaigning against the ERA, right? We don't actually want to live in a genderless society that doesn't recognize the advantages and disadvantages that both genders face.
Are we assuming that gender and sex are the same thing in this circumstance?
No, in this circumstance,
they're different.
They're different. Gender is a social construct.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
But the more radical wings of people in my community in gender ideology actually would say now it used to be birth sex. You were born a certain sex. Now they say assigned sex or sex on your passport and medical papers. So the radical wings of my party of my community are actually getting rid of sex altogether and making it look like it's an arbitrary, capricious, and subjective construct like gender. And that was not the case just a few years ago. Nobody in my community was saying that sex was an arbitrary and subjective concept. But now they've become more radical, and they're saying not only is gender a social construct, so is sex. And that's why you have euphemisms like assigned sex at birth instead of just biological sex.
Kind of flies in the face of trust the science.
Yeah.
What if they just added handicaps to the sports? Like if you're playing with a dude on your team, like for female volleyball, the other team starts with 5 points or something.
I think personally, like I think that would kind of ruin
What about contact
what people
sports,
have
though?
worked for, though, right? Like all of the female athletes who have worked for something, who want to compete against other women to be at the top of their game or whatever, are losing that ability if you suddenly add on handicaps. I mean, it
think it could work for golf.
It gets very dystopian.
Gold tees, and white tees. And
Oh, good. Well, I love talking about the dark and weird world that people are trying to push us into. But I do think that we need to jump to super chats because we have such a supportive fan base. I'm going to pull up one from Scooby Dragon, who said, "Howdy, people. It's amazing how punctual Scooby Dragon has become with this first super chat of the night." C Cowboy says military assets are still not being used to help North Carolina. FEMA has only used the military to ferry around the governor and the media. Chances are they will not be used for rescue, recovery, or even logistics. The media is lying. I think this is such an interesting sentiment going into the election. Like everyone is saying, no, FEMA's doing, or at least corporate media is saying FEMA's doing a great job. And everyone else is like, no, they're not. We need more help. And they're like, trust FEMA. FEMA's great. I don't know how you guys feel about this.
it's almost like the government hates you and it's fine with you dying. I don't know.
It's not a positive message.
It'd be the first time in history.
Let's see. Never Summer 160, who has an American flag hat next to their name, says Caitlin Collins is HCB's evil twin. That's hilarious. I don't really remember what Caitlin Collins looks like, but that would be hilarious. Suncoast Samurai says, put a girl on. I'm here.
I'm here.
Sorry.
Seriously.
I was going to say I'm a biological human female, but I guess it depends on what type of girl you're looking for. We've got a diverse crowd tonight. Let's see. Tricky Hickey says, happy birthday to me. My tinfoil hat is telling me that the Dems are losing on purpose because the economy will crash and they want to blame Trump.
This goes back to the Teamsters holding off on their strike, right? They said, we'll start up in January. Mm-hmm. Maybe Trump gets in and they stop the supply chain.
And there's a report, I think, from the Washington Post that says that Biden was on some of the late night phone calls kind of trying to make that happen. Do you think that the longshoremen are promised something for delaying their strike, or do you think there's...
I can all but guarantee it.
Yeah, that's interesting. Let's see. Raymond G. Stanley Jr. says, Brimcast is better than Shimcast. There, I said it. Of course it is. You cannot trust Seamus Coughlin, who is here and disappears, and also, is mostly big cartoons. No, Seamus is great. I love the week that we did Shimcast. It was really fun. And, if he didn't have his whole other business to run, I wish he could be here more. Let's see. I feel like I have to vamp while I also read at the same time to find stuff. Let's see. What is this? Heron Gaming News says Hannah Claire, should be forced to dress like Tim while covering for Tim, toque included. Hopefully my $5 Canadian, Canada. Can you please see? I can't read the rest of it, but
when he says toque, he means toque, and that's a hat.
Oh, it's very
It's the
Canadian
beanie
of
he
him.
wears.
I'm aware.
Toboggan.
Again, if you guys remember Shimcast and you don't know this episode, we did have a night where we all dressed like Tim, including Serge, our sweet producer, who is hiding off camera nowadays. But yeah, I mean, I think I should develop a signature look. Do you guys have like a signature podcast, I'm going on the air look? Do you guys have a signature outfit?
I just wear the same thing every day.
I wear a suit blazer. I try to, go with a more androgynous look. So typically I wear a button-up shirt and then a suit blazer. So it's a little bit different.
Tonight.
Yeah. Girl power.
T-shirt.
Let's see. Put a girl on says, where is my lectern? And also, love ya, Phil. And then there's
cheers.
That one, that emoji. Do you want to tell us some stories from tour?
I mean...
It is kind of funny that you were just like, what in your absence, like some people like take a sick day, but you took I'm going to go be a rock star break.
I mean, it's a fun job, so.
But you missed us. You came back.
I did miss you guys. I missed everybody here. It's a wonderful, wonderful opportunity to be here and talk smack on the internet. It's fun.
Did people think you were permanently gone?
No, a lot of people were asking when I was coming back. but I didn't feel like people thought I was permanently gone. I mean, I was talking about it regularly about, I'll be gone for a little while and stuff. So,
That you prepared them.
I did. I tried to prepare them, and people were frequently asking, "When are you coming back? When are you coming back?" And I was like, "I'll be back first week of October."
Did anyone come up to you during your shows and ask about it?
There was a couple people that came to the meet and greets and stuff. There was a couple that came with a sign that said "The left lane is for crime."
Oh, nice.
There was a couple people that came with shirts and stuff like that. So
Anti-communist, counter-revolutionary merch.
the no step on snack shirts were
nice.
were seen a couple times and stuff. So there was a significant representation of the Timcast audience, and it was nice to see. People were frequently saying, "When are you going back?"
What city moshed the hardest?
Mosh the hardest. I think it was Albuquerque. Albuquerque was really cool. They're a really, really good town. We did a show in Tampa that was pretty insane.
We get down.
Yeah, it was fun. It was a lot of fun. So it's hard to pick who had the best, the most energy. And I'm certainly not going to point out the ones that had the least, but there were a few out there that were just like, all right, this is not, it's a Monday or whatever. So
It's making me laugh because I'm going reading through the super chats, and like there's a bunch that are like this one. Joey's Razor says, "Phil is back. Hell yeah." I think they really did miss you.
I appreciate the warm welcome back.
Someone is asking me if I locked Seamus outside again and that he is just a cat and not a leprechaun. I have done nothing to Seamus the cat. I don't even know if that's his name anymore. I've heard a rumor it's changing.
Yeah, I thought Tim changed it.
I thought he did too, but that's a question for Tim.
before-
As far as I know, that cat is totally safe, and if something's going on, it had nothing to do with me. It's so nerve-wracking to be on the internet with accusations. Let's see. Oh, this one's nice. Mike Coney says, Broomcast IRL is amazing and the best show on the internet. Phil, you lost the game.
Oh, it's not just me. Everyone lost it now.
Yes, we all lost together.
How can you do that?
If you don't know it, you should just stay out of it. You don't want to know.
All right.
Okay. Kane Abel says, Phil, the death toll is up to 1,000 or more from what I have read. I haven't read 1,000. I have read 200, but I've heard that the missing toll, which is the problem.
Yeah, the thing, like I said, the people that are missing, it's not likely that it's going to be, be a situation where you're trying to save lives. It's more recovery now. It's horrible to say, but there's a lot of people in the mud. There's a lot of people that are probably going to remain missing indefinitely because they're, buried underneath a lot of mud, and it's just horrible.
It is horrible, and I'm actually really glad that there are so many people, independent media especially, who are talking about this so much, because it is sort of my fear that in our microscopic attention span news cycle that this will be something that becomes a problem for someone else. I mean, we've had other extreme weather. This is obviously the worst in recent years. But, like there was flooding in Tennessee a couple of years, or I think a year and a half ago, 2 years ago. And it wasn't maybe as bad, but also like it didn't get the attention that maybe it needed. So it's good that people are keeping it front of mind and seeing if they can find ways to help. John Hansen says, Phil, glad you're back. I appreciate your perspective, sir. Crew, baby number 2 will be here on 10/18, assuming she decides to come early.
Congratulations.
With like a laugh crying emoji. I think babies come whenever they decide to, but I've never known the details of that. Ian Slater says Biden Harris is doing the same as CCP during their floods this year, stopping private citizens so the government gets the glory sick. Yeah, I think there are a lot of people who feel that way, that this is like, let the government do it, otherwise you're just mean to the government.
Buttigieg was shutting down airspace. People were flying drones trying to find survivors, and Buttigieg shut down the airspace. He said, stop flying your drones. We don't want to find people.
Yeah.
It's disgusting. It's actually very disgusting. It makes me angry. And we're not on the after shows, so I'm going to stop talking about it.
And you would think, I get if there are certain things the government feels like, they have experts, they have special equipment, like maybe there are a couple things that they feel like they have to have one point of contact handling. But not allowing Starlinking is so bizarre to me. Like, you don't want people to be able to
Well, they kind of
potentially
lost
say,
the
I
drone
need help.
argument after Butler, PA, right?
Yeah.
Well, they're bad with drones and technology, apparently. Let's see.
It's pettiness. It's pettiness. That, you know, they don't want Musk to help, and so they make petty garbage like this that is, you know, not. It's only prolonging the suffering of people.
Yeah, I think if we ask the people who lost everything and who are missing loved ones, hey, do you want to wait for the government to get involved and take their time setting up in all the hotels and all the resources, or do you want to have private citizens who are your neighbors come help and find you?
There's arguments about funding and stuff like that, and there's one thing that I want to point out. The limitations that are going on right now, it's because we're under a CR, continuing resolution, and on day one, the president, the Speaker of the House, and the Senate Majority Leader should have been calling, and because we're in a recess, they should have been calling for everyone in Congress to get their ass back to D.C. and vote to fund this. Vote to make sure that the people of North Carolina and all affected areas in Georgia and Florida, all of the affected areas, make sure that those people had what they needed. So it's a failure of the entire government. It's a failure of the Speaker. It's a failure of the Senate Majority Leader, and it's a failure of the executive to not say to all of Congress. Congress should have actually said on their own. They should have said, we need to get back to D.C. I know we're out here fundraising, trying to make sure that we have the money to continue our campaigns, and I know that it's right before an election, but F your campaign. Get back to D.C. and vote to make sure that the government can do the things that the government needs to do to help the people. They have no problem, you know, sending money overseas, and they have all the authority that they need. They've got the printing press. They can just come back and vote and say, hey, we're going to go ahead and vote for this bill, make sure that this bill passes, so that way the people of North Carolina, of Georgia, of Florida, the people in South Carolina that need it have the resources they need. Mm-hmm. Where are they? Where are they?
Pinochet's helicopter tour says FEMA employees are overpaid for the quality of service they provided. We should demand FEMA employees employee pay be slashed by 50% minimum. Equity demands it. What do you guys think? Are there consequences for FEMA, or is this a Biden overarching
There are no
problem?
consequences for anyone.
I'm completely fine with slashing lots of government things. So, I mean, yes, off the bat. I think this response if it's not intentional, it is just gross incompetence. But I feel like it's leaning more towards intentional. I really do. When you're telling private citizens they can't help, these are neighbors. These are people who have a history and a career in rescue operations that are showing up to do this. Yep. And they're being told no. Their supplies are being confiscated.
I think that's interesting. I'm just going to read this super chat that I think is sort of relevant to that point. Brandon Moore says first responders are living in their ambulances and staging outside the affected areas, not in hotels. My work has 10 ambulances staging in Greenville, South Carolina, under FEMA, along with 200 plus others. So FEMA is not helping or giving access to
in the
emergency
hotels.
services?
I was going to ask that earlier, but I forgot.
I mean, is it
FEMA,
workers
government
FEMA
employees.
sends out? Yeah.
Yes. The same thing happened in Hawaii. They were staying at these resorts after the fire decimated an entire town. Like, it's absolutely...
You mean Oprah wasn't letting them come stay at her huge mansion that she had stolen from indigenous people?
No, that didn't happen.
If you activate the National Guard, the military can have a Burger King anywhere in the world in 48 hours.
Yep.
I mean, we have the ability. During the Berlin airlift, you had a plane landing every 30 seconds. Every 30 seconds. Don't tell me that we couldn't take care of these people. They absolutely could if there was the will. 100%.
Yeah.
And they're just not doing it.
I feel like they only do what's politically expedient or
100%.
what's going to help them in the election. And if if a whole bunch of illegal immigrants are going to vote for them, then whatever, they won't have a border and they'll let them flood in. Everything they do is based on their own selfish needs and desires. And I think you're seeing that play out here. What can these people who probably now can't even vote because there won't be a place to vote, what can they do for us? Nothing. Okay, well, whatever. Who cares what happens? Oh, but a bunch of illegal immigrants just flooded into the country. Let's give them Visa cards and let's put them up in luxury hotels because they're going to vote for us. And so you just kind of see who gets their attention and who doesn't. All they care about is votes.
Lucky38 says, glad to see you back, Phil. All That Remains is one of my all-time favorite bands. Darkened Heart and The Fall of Ideals are some of my favorite metal albums, unparalleled in the genre. When I saw you on Timcast, I had to do a double take.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it very much.
Wouldn't it be funny if more people find out about All That Remains because of Timcast?
I think there's probably some that I'm sure that there
Me
are
in particular,
some.
but
Yeah,
you know. That's because I'm ignorant and don't know anything about music. There are some questions for Tim, but I feel as though I cannot answer him on his behalf as he is not here.
You text him.
Yeah.
Bro.
Call him from the road. Hey, Tim, put him up to the phone.
Bro, they're asking this in the chat.
Let's see. This is James Stuntel Flat said, the ideal situation is a united community and divided power structures, but what we have is the inverse. I think that's true. We do have more of a united government and very deeply divided communities. And this is something I think about a lot because I think American culture is precious and we sort of didn't maintain it. Obviously, immigration has impacted the way our country has developed, but there was always this idea that you were joining something and that while you might bring some of your own backgrounds or whatever with you, that ultimately the purpose was to become part of this bigger system and contribute to our values and ideals. And I think in some ways, by not maintaining them, we make it harder for people who are legally immigrating to this country to become American, but we also make it very challenging for our young people to know what it means to be a country, and therefore they feel like there's nothing to maintain here.
I think we also have a very divided community because of the 24-hour news cycle. And, they're all for-profit corporations. They don't care about getting the truth out or reporting on things that matter. They care about their bottom line, providing entertainment. That's all they are entertainment corporations. And as a result, there's been a lot more acrimony and a lot more division within the community because the media is always posting headlines that they think are going to get clicks because all they care about is profit and not the truth and not about us coming together. And so, again, I think it's just a complete abdication of their job that the media is sowing seeds of acrimony among all of us in the community. And instead of coming together, we're hating each other. And I think that is a direct outgrowth of what the media does and what they choose to report on and how they choose to report on issues. They've really just divided us as a culture and as a community, and I think it's kind of shameful.
Yeah. Ravens Gray says, has anyone done a facial recognition survey of the various Harris appearances, specifically the people attending these events? It would be interesting to see how many repeat faces are in the crowd when she speaks in, quote, public. Do you think that there's just an entourage that the Harris campaign is keeping with them at all times to fill up stadiums?
I mean, the logistics behind busing in, how many people to the event? Probably not.
Yeah.
But they do bring out musicians who play. It's free concerts, right? What was her was it in Pennsylvania she went to?
Megan Thee Stallion was it, I think?
That was very uplifting for women when Megan Thee Stallion sang. As a woman, I found it very empowering.
As a woman, I definitely did not. But I'm not a Megan Thee Stallion fan, I will be honest. And I think it was the beginning of this. We need pop culture stars, specifically female pop culture stars, to win us this election. I think that's not a good strategy, and I also think it's a misunderstanding of what women and young voters want. Megan Thee Stallion's not going to help anyone make a down payment on their home, as far as I know. Let's see. Ma Nipples says January 6th is just a bad theater play. Is it a play now, or I heard it was a movie?
It is a movie. Babylon Bee is releasing it, I want to say, next week on the 11th. So they did a mockumentary for January 6th. No, it's I got to fly out to California and play a part in it, so it's lots of fun. But
Now I want to see this.
in order to see it, you have to become a member at their website, Babylon Bee. And I think there are plans at some point to let it go mainstream, but for now, next week on the 11th, you can watch the movie.
I love their Instagram. Their social media is absolutely amazing. They're pretty spot on.
They're also really good people. Like I was out in their studio, and every single one of them, they're such genuine people. They just want to laugh. They want to get back to a time where we could look at politics, laugh at it, and move on.
Mm-hmm. What a time. I feel like now it's just everyone's identity and thoughts at all times. I think there is political exhaustion. People are sort of like, let's get this over with because I would like to have other interests outside politics. It can be kind of draining, especially after almost a decade of Trump is the worst person ever and you must do anything to not elect him. Steve Pettigilio, I think is how you say his name. If Kamala invokes the 25th, can she still serve 2 terms?
Yeah, because I'm pretty sure that because there's only a couple months left, like now is a month left or whatever, I'm pretty sure that it wouldn't count.
Not a month. I mean, it's through just January, right? It's like 3 months left.
Well, yeah, okay, so
I know we all feel like the election is when it's over, but he will hang out in the White House like a nice ghost for a while.
Or just start World War III and suspend elections.
You know,
it's, lots of plays.
But I do think that if she only has like a few months, I think that it's something like 2 years.
There's a cutoff point.
I think I could be wrong, but I don't think that having a few months would count against her being able to run for 2 terms.
This is Addie's World. They say, welcome back, Phil. I have missed you. You did a wonderful job on coming home with the celebration emojis, like 4
Thank you.
Yeah, how was coming home, guys? I feel like we just
really
hit
good.
the end of the charting week.
I mean, look, it's kind of hard to explain, but yesterday when we finished the week stronger than we started it, that doesn't happen every day. So thanks again to everyone who bought it. Especially if you bought it on iTunes, there's a method to this madness. I know it's really difficult, but I appreciate it, and it will pay off.
Well, that's awesome. I don't think people always can see how hard everyone is working, especially you and Ken. You guys do a lot to make the music high quality and something people enjoy watching. So I think you guys both deserve a lot of credit for that. And with that, sadly, the second ever full-time Brimcast comes to the end. It's been so fun having all of you guys here. I know you missed him. He's alive and well. He's on a secret mission. I can't say where. Probably it's in Pennsylvania. I can't say what he's doing, but check out his social media. You can see what's going on there. If you want to get more content like this, you should subscribe to this channel. You should follow all of our social medias everywhere. I think it's pretty much Timcast on most platforms. And you should become a member on timcast.com. If you're not a member, but you're watching the show, you're missing out because what are we doing here, team? If you want to follow me, I'm on Instagram at hannahclaire.b. I'm on Twitter and everywhere else at hannahclaireb. Again, thanks for everything you do. Josh, do you want to shout anything out?
Sure, you can find me on Instagram at Josh Sider Official. I'm a trans advocate and educator, and I make educational videos, short videos on my Instagram.
What are you, my lectern guy?
I'm exclusively on Twitter at Lectern Leader. Want to say hi to the wife. Hey, baby, be home soon.
Oh, that's so nice.
Cool. Oh, Carter Banks here again. Thanks everyone who bought Coming Home. Shout out to Stephen Lee Rachel for writing something. I just posted that on my Twitter at Carter Banks. But yeah, good to have Phil back. It's my birthday tomorrow, so if you do anything for my birthday, follow my YouTube at Carter Banks. Phil?
I am Phil That Remains on Twix. I'm Phil That Remains Official on Instagram. The band is All That Remains, and we don't have anything booked right now, so you can check out our videos on our YouTube page. It's All That Remains on YouTube. We have 3 videos from our upcoming record available. We got Divine, No Tomorrow, and Let You Go. And don't forget, The Left Lane is for crime.
Thank you guys for everything. Come back on Monday, see more videos. Bye.